I'm here today with Mr. Kelly Forbes, Director of Bilingual Acquisition and Cultural Knowledge at Crooked Oak Public Schools in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And Kelly has brought us some clips that deal with vocabulary development in Oklahoma classrooms, whether they're elementary or secondary classrooms. I really appreciate the fact that you brought these, Kelly, because I think that it will really help teachers make meaningful connections between what they've heard in the lecture, what they've experienced in their own classrooms, and what they'll be seeing in your videos. So let's take a look at those clips, and when we come back, I'll ask you a few questions about what we've just seen.
All right. We're going to go over the vocabulary that you guys already learned. You guys already know these words, yes? Yes. Who knows the words from the story? I know that you already do, okay? We're going to review it so we're all on the same page, yeah? Yes. So we're all working what? Together. Together. Good job. All right, what's this first word? Everyone say it. Beamed. 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 And I put it up here in another language. What's that?
Yeah.
I put it in which language?
Spanish.
Spanish. Yeah, who could read that in Spanish? Irradiar, yes. So beamed, irradiar. What is that? What's that sentence say? If something beamed, it shined brightly. Can anyone give me any example of beamed? Yes. The sun. The sun beams. What else beams? A flashlight beams. What else? The lights beam. So what's the opposite of the sun?
The moon.
The moon. Does the moon beam? It does. Does light come down?
Yes.
Yeah, there's light. So even the moon beams. So far?
So good.
So good. All right, what's this one say?
Argued.
Argued. Yes? Argued. What's the word in Spanish?
Discutir.
Discutir. All right, can all the boys read this to me real quickly? To disagree loudly with someone is to what? Who argues the most, do you think? The boys or the girls? I think it's the girls. It is the girls. No, it's not. Oh, wait a minute. What are we doing? Oh, I think we were just arguing, yeah? Is that a good thing to do?
No.
Does that bring us together? No, it pulls us what? Apart. The first one says compose. I have it out of order. And what's the word in Spanish? Componer. Do they look the same?
Yes.
So what do you think a cognate means? Words that what? Look the same, all right? So we have compose, which is componer. Trascender means what? Transcend. What about recitación means what? Recitation. Euphoria. Euphoria means what? Euphoria. Phenomena would mean what? Phenomenon. Expresión would mean what? Estructura would mean what? And improvisación would be what? Huh? Impression? No, that was expresión. Okay. We're going to go through these now together, okay? So if you got one wrong, just go ahead and correct it as we go through, okay? And this is for you to see what you knew before and what you didn't know, okay? All right, personification. There's the picture that it goes with. How many of you guys got that one correct? Yeah? You feel good about it? All right, personification. What is that? What does it say right here? Wow, that's really, really good. Let's do it all together, okay? 1, 2, 3. The attribution of a personal nature or human characteristics to something non-human, or the representation of an abstract quality in human form. Whew, is that how you guys talk every day?
No.
Oh, no? All right, how would you explain this to me in your own words? The car is smiling, yes. So personification, how would you describe that to me?
Fake. SpongeBob.
SpongeBob, okay. That's a good example. Why is SpongeBob an example of personification? Because sponges aren't alive, right? They don't have eyes and teeth and walk around with shoes on and whatever. They don't do that, yeah? So give me a definition in your own words. What is personification?
Something that is not human characteristics.
There you go. Write that down next to personification, okay? Write down your own definition. This is for you, not for me. This is for you. So whatever is going to allow you to remember this, I want you to write that down, okay?
Kelly, thanks for those fantastic clips. I'm really excited to see so many good strategies used for vocabulary development in these short segments that you've brought to us. Can you take a minute to just kind of explain what you're doing here as far as strategies that you're using and maybe share some insight into why you selected those strategies?
Yeah, definitely. I get real excited about teaching vocabulary. There's so many fun things that you can do to help these little ELL kiddos actually grasp the meaning of a word. And there's a whole lot of words that don't have just concrete, definite definitions sometimes, and so that's wherever the creative side of me gets to come out and kind of think outside the box and make up some really fun ways to help these students learn the words. And vocabulary is always such kind of a hot spot for teachers, especially teachers who have ELL students, because there's so many vocabulary words that they have to be able to understand in order to comprehend and therefore perform well on their state testing. And so I try to incorporate a lot of basic things sometimes, such as the use of cognates, and we'll discuss that a little bit further later on. Also, watching out for those false cognates, as well as repetition, as well as total physical response, the use of realia, the use of manipulatives, and things of that nature to make that lesson come to life for that child.
Great. So as far as content language goes, we know that one of the frustrating things about content language is that it's specific to the discipline in which you teach. And so that means that language that we use, say, in a math class or in a science class, is not heard and used and repeated anywhere else except for those classes. So how can we support that vocabulary development across the curriculum?
It just needs to be used thematically in all different classes. This is a really good time for schools, professional learning communities, or just on their team plans or things of that nature, to try to be able to incorporate the words that we use in one content area and to see how we could possibly also use those words in another content area, just to help with that repetition and that reinforcement of the vocabulary word.
And what about these process or function words like interpret, summarize, describe?
I had a professor one time who told me that if you can't, well, she said if you can draw it, then you understand it. And so that's kind of what I was referring to when I said not all words have a concrete definition which would be comprehensible maybe for an ELL student, or for hardly any student maybe. And so we want to be able to try to find a way to help them comprehend what that word is and still be able to use it. And it may not be with other words, it may be with a picture to help them understand that word. And sometimes if you can see it, feel it, use one of your, senses for it, then that way you can also understand it.
So what do you think about the old-fashioned vocabulary skill of looking up definitions and writing them down? Do you think that's helpful?
Yes, I actually think it's very helpful to incorporate that. However, you can't stop there. You have to move forward and past that. I believe it's in the middle school clip that we see here that I'm talking about. I think it was maybe personification or some other form of speech, but what we were talking about was what personification I think is, and it was a long definition. And then afterwards I said, okay, now write it in your own words. After we talked about it, explained it, give examples of it, now I want you to write it in your own words so that way you can fully understand what I'm talking about.
So you're really doing two things there. You're tying it into their background experiences, which helps make valuable connections to their memory base, so that they can own those words and connect them meaningfully to other things. You're also helping them linguistically by paraphrasing in a language set that is appropriate for their current level of English proficiency.
Exactly. Whenever I introduce the words in all three different levels, the elementary, the middle, and the high school, I do have the benefit of speaking Spanish. However, I did not want to use the language in the classroom because not everyone can, and that is totally okay, and sometimes even better if you can't. However, I said in one of the video clips that I just use Google Translate, which a lot of teachers can do. And now Google Translate or other forms of looking up a word in a dictionary are typically pretty correct when it's just on a word-to-word basis, and so I do encourage teachers to do that as well. And so I not only present the word, but then I present the word in the language of the other students, and you can also do it with Arabic and other languages. And then I also have a picture that goes with it, a sentence, a definition, and then they give me their own definition and their own words as well as examples.
I think sometimes it's funny when you use internet translator like that. You might pick a word, and if it's not a language that you know, the students might come and say, that's not the word that we use, or the word that you selected from the list of possible examples might have a different cultural connotation than what you're intending. So I think creating a partnership with your students and helping them realize that that is a strategy that they can use in English as well, but they need to check with a more competent user of English to make sure that it's correct is really important.
And not only that, if you really think about it, they're using higher order thinking skills whenever they are doing that, because they have to understand the word enough in English and enough in Spanish to be able to even tell you, wait, oh, we don't use it like that, or culturally we say it differently in this way. And so you're actually really getting deeper into that mindset of that child, and they're comprehending even more because that now vocabulary rich aspect is in 2 different languages and has more meaning to it, and so you're just building more vocabulary than what you would have in the beginning.
Excellent. What about idiomatic expressions?
Those are really, really difficult. The idioms that we were discussing in that class as well, talking about as happy as a clam, and you and I were saying earlier, are clams even happy? Do we even know that for sure? But there are definitely a lot of things that we say all of the time about the, like I said, happy as a clam, the obvious raining cats and dogs, and there's even some other ones in Spanish that I hear sometimes, and like killing 2 birds with 1 stone. I mean, we're not literally doing things of that nature, and so to explicitly, not just implicitly, but to explicitly explain what this says and what it means really is beneficial for the students.
Yeah. So if we were to say to the kids, okay, let's wrap it up.
Yeah,
they might be looking for a blanket or
Yeah,
some saran wrap or something.
Yeah. And not only about idiomatic expressions, but also thinking about word problems in math whenever they run, 3 blocks. Okay, is that a kid holding 3 blocks? There's a YouTube video that I saw one time, and that's what it was. This little ELL guy, he was looking all around the classroom, and he envisioned in his head, okay, this kid holding 3 blocks and running. Well, that's not what it was. So it's very easy for them to get confused and hung up on words that they might know in one context but not in another.
What do you think about language structure, where we're using prefixes and suffixes and identifying base words? Do you find that type of word study to be helpful to students?
Oh yeah, definitely. It helps them identify the meaning of a word almost readily after they do get a good grasp of those prefixes and suffixes.
I think that some of those prefixes and suffixes actually, where they don't translate directly, they have similar structures and patterns in other Latin-based languages. And so for some students, that's kind of an easy leap. But for others, understanding how those systems work in English is a really important part of helping them understand the meaning of the vocabulary words that they're encountering.
Exactly, true. Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm wondering, is there anything else about vocabulary that you think that teachers should know as it relates to second language acquisition or struggling students?
I would say, as far as vocabulary goes, always encourage your students, if they feel more comfortable maybe reading in their native language, to let them do that. Research does show that a child who reads for 15 minutes at least a day in any language really does build their literacy skills. Well, with that being said, we all know the more reading that you do, the more vocabulary that you also learn. And as we talked about earlier, some of those use of cognates, especially for Spanish speakers, and the majority of our ELLs in Oklahoma are Spanish speakers, that they can learn so many words in their native language and still have that transfer into the second language. And as I also said, be careful of those false cognates sometimes. You don't want to be pregnant whenever you're really embarrassed, which happens in Spanish sometimes. However, but really encouraging the promotion, I guess, of their native language and to be able to really reap the benefits of that, you all will be very surprised about how much more vocabulary can be learned and also can be taught.
Yeah, if we encourage kids to think critically and to share ideas that they're learning in school with their families, then they can come back when their English is more developed linguistically. If they have the concepts, then they can connect language to those concepts and bring value to their homes, to their communities, and start to think of themselves as academics, as contributors in a learning community. And that is really, as far as the identity development that we hope for in all students, but especially in struggling learners, to help them stay engaged and help them stay connected in school. We really want them to feel welcome. And I think that the best way to do that is to recognize their value, recognize their intelligence, and help them make connections between what they know and what they like to be able to say and do in English.
Yes, validating our students will help us a whole lot in the classroom.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. I really, really loved the clips, and I look forward to the other clips that you've brought. The discussions, I think, will be very relevant to future lectures.
Well, thank you so much, and muchas gracias.